This is Robert Kraft, and I'm coming to you live on SNNLive, and we're here at the 2016 LD Micro Invitational in Bel Air, California. With me right now is George Carpenter from MYnd Analytics, MYnd Analytics. It's a publicly traded company. The symbol is CNSO. George, welcome to SNNLive.
Thanks very much, Robert.
It's great to have you on our program. Now, for our audience that may not know the MYnd Analytics story yet, let's get an overview first, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, we have a predictive analytic tool that helps patients get on the right medications for mental disorders. 1 out of 4 of us will, during our lifetime, have depression or anxiety or some kind of mental disorder. But unlike all other areas of medicine, there's no test, no way for me to know as a doctor which medication will work in your brain versus which ones will work in mine. So really, we have the first test the doctors can use to get people on the right medication first.
So what's the history of the company? How did it get to where it currently is today?
Kind of like Viagra or penicillin is one of these accidents in medicine that a doctor who was a pathologist went into psychiatry, worked with another psychiatrist here in Los Angeles, and it was a large group practice, and his first question was, why don't we measure anything here? Every other part of medicine we've got some kind of diagnostic tool, but here we just basically use trial and error to medicate people. So they decided to start doing EEGs. That's the electroencephalogram. If you've seen the NASA astronauts, they wear a cap, little electrodes on it. They measure your brain. And they did this for about 20 years. Developed what is now a greater than 10,000 unique patient database with 38,000 actual outcomes of people who did badly or well on a specific medication. Correlated that with the EEG, and now we have a reference test that doctors can use to get people on the right drugs.
All right, so you kind of did go over a little bit on how the technology works and how let's say when a patient comes in, but let's give the full picture very clearly. What's the process like for a patient that is coming in to do one of your tests?
Typically, patients contact us when they've already failed multiple medications, and so we deal with some of the toughest cases. And it's basically a 4-step process. First, we bring them in and give them an EEG. The 2-megabyte file of your EEG goes into the cloud. The data from your brain is compared across 5,000 normative variables that define a unique normal brain, and so we define the abnormality. Then the third step is we correlate it with people like you whose brains were similar to you on those 5,000 variables, and which medications didn't perform well for them and which ones did. And then the last step is we download it to the doctor, who on their iPad can see these are the medication classes that Robert would not respond to, and these are the ones that he would respond to if he were like all those other patients. And the same thing with individual agents within class. So it's almost like an antibiotic assay, only for mental health care where, there's quite a lot of drugs that don't work.
And does the company currently partner with, let's say, a lot of psychopharmacologists because they really want to help give the right drugs for these people?
Yes. Most of our users are neuropsychiatrists that have a background in neurology or psychiatry, and some of the best neuropsychiatrists in the world are using this tool.
So does the company currently have any sales? What's going on there?
We have very minimal revenues to date. We've been focused on really 2 things. One is research and product development, and the other is military trials. Our 4th randomized controlled trial will be published sometime this year, and it's a work that we did with the Department of Defense at 2 of their major military treatment facilities on soldiers with depression and some with PTSD.
So what's the barrier to entry? What I would imagine is that nobody else has a database like you do. Correct?
Yeah, as small as we are, I hate to say that our goal is to be the Google of neuroscience, but we'd really like to be the Google of neuroscience. We have the largest database. We protect it. We have 22 international patents, and it took 20 years to get to this data. Surprisingly, Google is now, they've announced $1 billion project to collect also 10,000 patients, Google employees, data and try to come up with biomarkers that are similar to ours. So we know this area of predictive analytics, whether it's IBM Watson or Google or what we do, is a huge growth area, and we think that we're the first and the largest with real well-vetted patient data, which is going to propel our growth.
And do you have any IP protecting your process?
Yes, we've got 22 patents, the basic method patents, and we have patents for transmission of the data over the internet. And we just announced a couple weeks ago that we've added genomic testing. So we're a digital phenotype. We take actual functioning brain measures and compare them with outcomes. We're now doing the same thing with genomics because there are some good findings that apply to about 5 to 10% of the U.S. population. So, with our test, which is 86% predictive, and genomics, which is 5 to 10%, we think we're going to be the only company in the world that can do what we do.
So I know at the beginning you said that the company's focused on predictive analytics, but there's a diagnostic aspect to this as well. So with that said, is there any kind of FDA clinical trials that are around this that you need in order to validate what you do?
Well, and we've done 3 trials, and the 4th will be announced this year. And we worked very closely with the FDA since I came on board to find a regulatory place for this. Right now we are at Class 1 MDDS, so we actually publish all of our data. If you're a researcher and you're in this community, you can see all of our correlation models. But we keep the actual classifiers as intellectual property under our 22 patents. Based on the results of this upcoming study, we may be a Class 2, file a Class 2 510K with some existing predicates or de novo, and that's a decision we'll make later in the year.
What's your background? How did you get into this?
I've always been in data companies. My first company about 20 years ago was a division of Baxter that we took private, mainly because we were chicken to tell our wives that we were going to lose our jobs. So we pulled our money together and went private, and we ended up going on NASDAQ and becoming a market leader. That was a company called Core. And my last company was a physical medicine company with a database that was, we became a market leader. And so this company, it's by far the hardest I've ever had, but it's also the best technology. So we have a really committed group, a bunch of insiders who've invested, and we think this is really going to make a big difference in a lot of people's lives.
So what's the business model? Is there a reimbursement aspect in this?
Surprisingly, since the advent of mental health parity, about half of our cost is covered. The EEG and the quantitative EEG are 2 existing CPT codes that most payers pay for today. And so really the only out-of-pocket for the patient is the $400. It's $800 total. EEG is half of that. The half that is the peer report isn't covered by most carriers, but we have a preliminary emerging technology approval from United Healthcare, and they basically said you're one study away from full reimbursement, and we hope that the study that we've done with the military will qualify.
So from what you can tell me, what are some of the milestones and growth drivers for the business moving forward?
There's really 4 things that we're doing this year that we think are big valuation drivers. One is the publication of military results, as I mentioned. Second is addition of genomic testing, which we've done. A third is really working with the strategics in this area. IBM Watson, Google, 23andMe, there's a lot happening in predictive analytics, and what we find is that a lot of them have really fantastic algorithms and neural nets, but there's not very much source data. And so we really think we can be kind of the Google of neuroscience in terms of our database. And then finally, we opened up 2 MYnd Analytics centers here in Southern California to service existing demand, and that seems to be a good model for us. So we want to get revenue traction from that as all of the news comes out about the company.
So you're strictly just in California for the time being?
Well, we have doctors around the world, but most of our revenue and growth right now is coming from California.
So when it comes to mental health, one thing you want to see is the proof in the pudding, where, now that these people are getting prescribed drugs that should work for them. So do you have any results or anything published that says anything like that?
Yeah, actually, all of our randomized controlled trials and all of our studies have shown a 2 to 3 times improvement in medication efficacy. So if you can imagine, this is an area where payers spend $30 billion a year on just the drugs, and they work about a third of the time. So there's a lot of waste. And we've worked with actuaries at Milliman and Analysis Group, and they say that the cost of me failing 2 medications, typical patient for us, is about $8,500 per patient per year. So the ability to save insurance companies, literally billions of dollars, is one of the things that makes us think this is going to be a great market.
So where can our audience go and find more information about the company?
www.MyndAnalytics.com. and just click Contact Us, and we have a lot of people who find us on the web at that site.
And that's MYndAnalytics.com. My name is Robert Kraft, and I'm coming to you live on SNNLive, and we're here at the 2016 LD Micro Invitational in Bel Air, California. With me again has been George Carpenter from MYnd Analytics, MYnd Analytics. Publicly traded company, the symbol CNSO. George, thank you so much for
Thanks
coming
so much,
on.
Robert.